You guys know I love MMOs. You guys know the only game I really play is World of Warcraft. It's been that way basically since 2005. It's basically killed my drive to play anything else. But do we have bad news for the future of MMOs? Oh no, this is very concerning. Let's see what Force Gaming has to say about the future of our favorite game genre.
So a few weeks ago, we covered this crazy story about Nexon scamming its players for well over a decade. And I'm not just talking about them making MMOs with cash shops and microtransactions. No, we all knew that was happening, and it's pretty par for the course in the genre. What they were doing was way worse. After a multi-year investigation, the Korean Fair Trade Commission announced that they found Nexon guilty of unfair rate manipulation for cash shop items in MapleStory. In that game, they sell these things called cubes. These are essentially...
What is this? I don't even... This whole... I mean, I like the bit art and stuff, but man, this is a weird, kinky looking game. Oh my god, look at all this shit you can buy. Of course, enhancements, yeah.
Loot boxes that grant
sure, more like this should say requirements to play, probably.
You buy a cube, roll the dice, and are given a random reward depending on which cube you purchased. This can include passive...
We're talking about a gateway drug into gambling. Jesus, it's a dice roll that you're paying for?
Of stat boost and gear upgrades. The odds of getting any particular outcome from a cube were published by Nexon a few years ago, as has become industry standard for pretty much any game that sells loot boxes. Nowadays, companies...
Yeah, I don't know if it's industry standard or it's law. Isn't it law now that they have to basically tell you what the chances are of getting something? I'm pretty sure that's legally required now. I'd have to look at the law again to, I'm going to give you the old, I have to look into it as a lawyer excuse, but I'm pretty sure that it's required at this point. So these companies would not do it if they didn't have to. They don't give a shit. They'll just freaking let you, buy 100 loot boxes. But I think they require it now.
Sells loot boxes. Nowadays, companies will just
MapleStory
tell you
was
like
actually
what
a lot
the
of fun.
chance you have of getting.
God, it was so many microtransactions, heavy to play with any comfort. Yeah. That's
whatever it is you're looking for when you purchase some sort of a loot box. The problem in this circumstance, though, was that the actual odds were not only not as published, they were also regularly being manipulated, and the rarest, most highly coveted outcomes, the thing that pretty much everyone buying cubes was hoping to get, that was literally impossible to acquire. Your odds were actually zero. So the investigation revealed that after Nexon began selling cubes, they progressively lowered the probability of getting an item upgrade, and they blocked users from ever obtaining the most ideal stat boost combination. That most powerful role that players were wanting was never achievable. On top,
that is fucked. Oh my god. Yeah, that's the ultimate, man. They were literally changing the game rules while people were playing and giving them false information.
Wow. But doing this rate manipulation, they on several occasions made false public statements that no such changes were occurring, while those changes were in fact actively occurring. The investigation also revealed, while all of this was taking place, that Nexon had many back and forth conversations via internal emails about whether or not the company should disclose this information.
Don't put it in writing. Dear God, don't put it in. Do you really need an attorney to tell you don't put it in fucking writing? What's with these companies? Putting some of their worst shit out in an email. What the hell's wrong with them? They put it in writing. They're like, "Hey, we're doing this illegal shit. Should we tell people about it? Should we inform people about this illegal shit we're doing? What the fuck? There's a reason why drug deals don't happen via email. What the hell's wrong with people?" Oh my god, they put it in writing.
But ultimately they decided
Rule number
against
one,
it
guys,
because
don't put
of
it in
course
writing.
they did. In the end, from the time MapleStory cubes were first made available for purchase in 2010 to
Does this
when
mean I
this
can get my money back?
investigation
I'd
took
have to
place
look
in
into it. I have no idea.
2021, Nexon had made roughly $420 million from
Holy
cube
crap.
sales alone, and as punishment from what was discovered, the Korean FTC fined Nexon $9 million, a measly 2% tax on their earnings. Surely this is going to stop them from ever doing it again. Now, that story alone is crazy, but buried in there was something that I find even more concerning for the entire loot genre, for the entire MMO genre. When making all this information public, the Korean FTC released many documents and details found during its discovery process, part of which was the reveal of a patent that Nexon holds in Korea pertaining to variable rewards based on player activity. Or another...
Oh my god. Oh, they patented it. The fuck? Which patent attorney was advising him on this? I am a patent attorney. I would never tell a company that I'm working for, yeah, oh yeah, you're doing something illegal. Let's go ahead and patent that shit. We don't want anyone else to do this illegal shit without our permission, of course. What the hell? Oh my God, these guys, they turned themselves in. What's wrong with them? They didn't. They not only did they put it in writing, they went to a patent office and patented this shit. Oh man.
In other words, the idea of changing the rate of item drops or the rewards gained from loot boxes based on the individual player. Now, I've always been aware
Oh my God. Oh my God. So when they got accused of doing this, how are they going to deny it when they literally patented the idea on how to do it? Yes, scuffed lawyer, for sure I am. But at least I know enough not to do the stupid shit these guys have done.
that this sort of thing could exist and may be happening in the games that I play, but seeing actual
the
confirmation in writing of a company officially registering their ability and intention to do so, man, as a fan of MMOs, as a fan of loot games, as a fan of ARPGs, I absolutely do not love the idea that this could be happening in the games that I'm playing today.
What
because
idiots.
Nexon, they might hold the patent for this in Korea, but they don't across the entire world, and that's where the concern comes in. Now, what
well, the way a patent works, and I'll just give you guys a quick overview. Yes, they don't hold the patent in the US or in China or anywhere else, but the thing is, if you have a game that you import into Korea, so say World of Warcraft is imported into Korea, that patent is still viable to go against your game, even though your game is an American game, right, is formed and created in America. If you import into that country where the patent exists, the patent can be used against you. Hence why a lot of American companies might not file in every country, but they'll file in the U.S., and even a lot of foreign countries will file in the U.S. only because they say, well, that's, if we're defended in the U.S., anybody who imports a product into the U.S., which is basically anybody who wants to make, money, anybody who imports into the U.S. is going to be, blocked by our patent, and they won't be able to do what they want to do. So they're going to have to license from them. So, yes, maybe they only filed in Korea. I'd have to look at the patent to see how they actually filed it. But they would still be basically defended against anybody who imports any video game into Korea.
Exactly am I talking about? Well, let's take a look. The patent for dynamic rates includes the following. If a lot of user activity, decrease rates. Increase rates if users have low activity. Change rates based on player location. If gacha items exceed expected number or set amount.
They called it gacha items in the patent. In the patent, they used the language gacha items. Oh my God. And you know what that means, right? That's not a typical term. Gacha is not a typical term, which means in the patent, they had to define it. They had to define what gacha meant. Oh my God, I'd actually love to translate and read this patent. That's fucking hilarious. If I had the patent number, I don't think he linked it anywhere, I would pull this up, translate it, and see how they defined gacha, the specification. They referred to it as gacha items.
Decrease rates. Change rates based on number of friends on buddy list. Change rates based on
for sure.
buddy list
Archon,
stats. Change rates for certain gacha items above some rarity. Change rates based on users' current items. So some of these aren't really that bad. And in fact, I would say there's parts of this that are totally normal and expected from MMOs. But a lot of them are pretty nefarious, especially the ones that pertain to items being purchased from the cash shop. Let's consider the implications here, starting with the most benign. So number 3, that says change rates based on player location. This one's actually totally normal, like having the rates of item drops change based on your location in game. That happens in most MMOs, as far as I'm concerned. Here we would be talking about things like loot tables that are tied to certain areas. So for example, in the Elder Scrolls Online, there are item sets that will only drop when you are in a particular zone. These are referred to as overland sets. So when you're out farming in Rivenspire, you've got like a 1% chance or something of getting a piece of the necropotent set from any of them.
Okay, that exists in World of Warcraft even. You got the whole Dragonflight, outdoor sets for the outdoor activities you did, so you can only loot those items. They can only, drop in Dragonflight zones. So that's what he's talking about. Yeah, that exists in every MMO, basically.
Mobs that you kill, but as soon as you leave that zone, that
your chances drop
to zero. You will never get it outside of the zone. Or you've got the items that will only drop in particular dungeons or raids, and we're not just talking boss loot, but dungeon-wide loot tables.
If you want a shot at a certain mount, you have to be doing certain content. Yeah.
Well, in World of Warcraft, you're only
in
going
a
to get
certain area.
set pieces of the Scarlet Mail set while farming mobs in the Scarlet Monastery. So this one makes
There it
sense. Not at
Good
all
example.
surprising. It's pretty much what I expect. It's what a lot of MMOs do. But that, of course, is just one interpretation of that line, because the other one could be not that it refers to adjust rates based on player location in game, but that it adjusts rates based on player location in the real world. So depending on where you are in the world, what region you are, where your IP address pings you at, they will then make adjustments to the rates. And of course,
I want to get invincible. Time to move. Got to move to somewhere. Got to move to Samoa. Higher drop rate of invincible for Samoans. That's what I got to do.
This would likely be referring to things like, depending on the country that you're located and the particular variation of the game that they want you to have, they will adjust the drop rates, the rates that you acquire currency, the rates that you acquire resources, how that may or may not be tied into changes into the progression depending on the part of the world that you're in, or maybe changes to the cash shop, so they might want to incentivize you to make purchases by reducing your rates in certain regions and not in other regions. That is the other more malicious variation and interpretation of this line of adjusting rates based on player location. But then we move on to checking numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 says if a lot of user activity decrease rates, and the ability to increase rates for users with low activity. Now, these are pretty self-explanatory, but again, think of the implications. So if you play a game a lot, your odds of getting higher rarity items could then be decreased by the developer. Or if you take a break, when you return, your rates might get bumped up, meaning you're more likely to get better loot. And I get why a developer would want to use a system like this. So if you've got someone, for example, who stops playing your game for some extended period of time, when they return, you want to give them incentive to stick around. So yeah, why not shower them with legendaries, drop a best in slot stat roll on some items that they get, make them feel really good so they want to keep on playing. And hey, in that circumstance, if you're that player, that sounds pretty great, right? But boy, does it suck for anyone actively playing the game, because the flip side of this coin is that the longer you play, they could potentially make it less likely that you get good items, literally punishing the most dedicated people playing the game. This would also be an effective way for a developer to pad out playtimes, for example. Like when you see someone who is clearly dedicated, they're playing the game every single day for multiple hours, why not dial back their rewards just a little bit, and they may very well end up playing for longer. That is, if they don't just quit out of frustration, and finding that balance would be the key, right?
Yeah,
and maybe that explains.
Keep them believing just enough that they can get it, right? You can't make them think it's impossible. You can't give them a 0%, then nobody's going to go for it. You got to make them believe just enough to keep them hooked, to keep them spending money. But at the end of the day, you also got to make the availability of the item rare enough that they'll never get it, so they keep spending money on the game. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle that they feed on.
Is why I got a nearly perfectly rolled bow on my falconer like 10 hours into playing Last Epoch. But in the 40 hours that I played since, every other one that's dropped has sucked, and I've only found a single version of this bow with any legendary potential, and it had nearly the worst possible stat rolls it could have. Maybe if I stop playing for a few weeks, I'll finally get the good drops that I'm looking for when I return. Am I assuming that's happening in Last Epoch? No, not necessarily. I assume it's probably just part of the RNG experience, but now we've got that seed of doubt, knowing that it's possible these rates could be manipulated based on player playtime. We've got Nexon with an active patent for that exact thing in Korea. Could other developers be doing it in other games and other parts of the world that are being made? I mean, it's possible. We can't say it's not possible, because clearly we know people can do it. It's within the realm of possibility. And this is where things get a little tricky, right? Because obviously this could all just be chalked up to RNG. Me not getting a great bow for my falconer in 40 hours. It could just be random luck of the draw. It is probably just random luck of the draw. I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, but we have to talk about the possibilities, and that's where the issue lies. Loot in these games and MMOs and ARPGs and looter shooters, it is random by design. You get random drops with random stats and affix rolls adjusted by the in-game circumstances that you're partaking in, like how you're going to get better rewards, and they're going to occur more frequently as your level gets higher, as you push into harder content, and the types of content that you're doing. Some combination and variation of all of these things will affect the loot drops that you're getting. It is part of the genre. Randomness has always been in these games. It is built in. But
it's built in. Rarity also makes getting items cooler. I mean, if you made every item available to every person, obviously the item loses some of its, luster, just like any mount you find, on the WoW store, right? It's 100% drop rate, essentially. You pay this much money, you get the mount, it's 100% guaranteed. But what does it do to that mount? Well, that mount's just not as cool anymore. Because it's 100% guaranteed you're going to get it. Do this thing, get this thing. All those items usually don't have the same luster, the same desire by the player base as an item that's, has more rarity. It's less likely you're going to find it, and thus when you get it, you are one of the few, right? One of the chosen ones. So rarity is built into these games. That's just how it works, and players want it that way. You don't want every game to be 100% drop rate. Imagine I already had Fearlath, because all you got to do is kill him and you get it. Well, maybe it's a bad example because I do wish that was the case, but you get what I'm saying.
But knowing that there could also then be this extra added layer where a developer is punishing you, not based on the content that you're doing, the difficulty of the content, the known mechanics that are within the game, but just based on your frequency of playtime, that's not really great. I mean, I guess it's not bad for the person who takes a break and then gets better loot when they return, but it is pretty shit for the users who are playing daily and then are being rewarded with worse odds, with worse loot drops. And just knowing that developers could be doing this, yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks the wind out of the sails, right? It's sort of like when you get these games that have built-in RMT. So if I'm just farming for gold and resources within a game, most of the time I'm under the assumption that this is just part of the game playing experience. Everything is good.
Does anybody know what company makes MapleStory? I'm just interested, just to see if I can find their patent.
I will farm gold for hours so long as the game is mechanically satisfying and interesting and I'm enjoying the experience and I'm working towards some sort of a set goal. That's just part of playing the game.
Nexon.
But yeah, the second a game has officially supported built-in RMT, that veil gets lifted a bit. Like when I can see, say it costs for 1,000 gold, you can get that for $10, but it takes 5 hours of grinding in game to farm 1,000 gold. At that point, I just kind of feel like I'm working for $2 an hour. I don't love it. And the similarity between these two things here is that it's just really demotivating. The same as farming gold for $2 an hour in games that have RMT, or knowing that the game could, the longer you're playing, reduce the odds of you getting good gear. That can sure really ruin the experience. And then we've got numbers 5, 6, and 8.
The problem is when you figure out how the gear system works or how like the percentage of drop rate works, it's kind of like pulling back the curtain. It does kind of ruin the game for people. So I wonder what the purchase rate, or even I wonder if they're even allowed to sell loot boxes in this game anymore, because the game is still active. MapleStory still exists, but I wonder if it stopped people from buying shit from them.
Which are sort of along these same lines. Change rates based on the number of friends on your buddy list. Change rates based on your buddy list stats, or change rates based on the user's current items. These kind of mesh together and follow the same general idea as above. They're making changes just based on things pertaining to you, but not based on the game's built-in mechanics. It's so like too many people on your friends list, sorry, you're going to start getting worse loot. If you have...
Wow, that's like an anti-streamer thing almost, right? Like, you know how they would say, like, oh, it's streamer loot luck and all this stuff? I mean, I would imagine streamers would have very big friends lists. And so the more friends you have, the less likely you are to get the item. I wonder what their logic was for doing that. Maybe somebody with a lot of friends in the game, you would assume they play the game a lot, so you can withhold items from them longer. They would keep playing the game. Whereas somebody with no friends is more likely to leave the game, right? Because they have less ties to it. So you want to give them items quicker to keep them loving the game. That's insane. Holy shit. A literal moment where being a person who's antisocial and not touching grass might actually benefit you. Yeah, as MapleStory 2 enjoyer, I love that system. What, more friends because you don't have friends? What are you saying, Artemis? More friends means less likely to get the loot. That's what that system does.
Really bad loot, on the plus side, we're going to start boosting you up. When it comes to the positive implications of this, we're all gravy, but it's the other side that just things get a little scary. And the absolute worst stuff, though, really, is the dynamic rates as they pertain to cash shop items. So that's number 4 and 7. If gacha items exceed expected number or set amount, decrease rates, and also changes rates for certain gacha items above some rarity.
Okay, I found a patent from that could be theirs. I looked up their patent records from Nexon, and this is one that refers to, they talk about gacha systems, because remember I said, if you use an item that's not typically, it's not of a language, you have to define it. So they define gacha systems in this patent. This is translated, so it's kind of wonky, but it says gacha systems refers to a drawing system that draws items and items. Okay, probably interpretation there. Gacha systems are generally used in a similar sense to random boxes, capsule machines, and the like. The user cannot predict which items to acquire. That is, a user who uses a gacha system purchases an opportunity to select an item or product rather than purchasing the desired item or product directly. Yeah, that's a pretty good definition of a gacha system. Basically, gotcha. Yeah, you're right. Like, you thought you were going to get that item, but you didn't. So it's basically eliminating the predictability of getting an item, but taking your taking your money. Yeah. Meanwhile, let's get your gacha system. Yeah, get your gacha item, and it's an orange. Yeah, we're gonna go for it. I'm gonna try to get my gacha for Fearlath today. We'll see. Very interesting how they define it. It's a pretty good definition.
That one's pretty explicit. I assume that's happening. But number 4, boy, if you're opening a ton of loot boxes and you get a few good items in a row,
gotcha.
Hey, guess what?
Rate.
They're going to nerf your rates, which means if you buy more boxes, you should expect to get garbage for a while. Now, if the implementation of this one is as it sounds, is as I assume it is, I mean, that should be illegal, right? Like, I get it. It's kind of similar to gambling. Sure, in gambling, you've got low odds for every single pull of the slot machine, but sometimes you win,
Gambling
and that's
over
great.
pixels.
But I assume it is super illegal and against gambling laws to decrease the rates of someone once they win. I mean, that sounds illegal, but legality or not, I'm not here to really argue about it.
Yeah, it probably is. You changing the odds of a game mid-game, I'm sure is illegal. I'm sure if a casino got caught doing this, they would get shut down. I imagine a casino in Vegas getting caught changing the odds of a blackjack game mid-game. That would be like adding cards to the deck, right? Because if someone's calculating the odds of a card dropping, like they're watching and they understand it's card counting, which is typically not supposed to happen either. But if you are card counting and you understand the odds of a card dropping, it would be like them grabbing a card off the deck that's already been played and slipping it back in and changing the odds of the game. That's how you'd be changing the odds of the game, because you would be flipping up the variables that exist. And that's for sure illegal. That would not be allowed. If a casino got doing that, they'd be done. So, yeah, I would say it's probably not legal.
That it's pretty
Even
crappy.
in a video game.
If a game that you're playing has this mechanic, you sure are going to want to know about it so that you don't go spending money after getting a good item to be almost guaranteed to get worse loot for some extended period of time. I mean, hey, if you needed any more reason to avoid spending money on loot boxes and gacha items, knowing that there's a chance that if you win some, you're guaranteed worse odds going forward, that sounds like as good of a reason as any. This whole thing is really complicated and frustrating because these games, as I said earlier, they've always had a lot of randomness involved. It's part of their nature. Random loot, random stats doled out at random intervals.
Yeah.
This is part of the gameplay loop. It is a big part of the reason
that's
why
not
a
a bad
lot
thing.
of us play.
That's not a bad thing. That motivates you to play, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. But changing the odds based on freaking things like friendless? What the hell? No, I'm not okay with that.
It has to feel fun and be satisfying to play, but then the draw of that loot is what keeps you playing. You keep pushing that button knowing that good stuff will come eventually. You just don't know when. I mean, it's an entire genre of games built on variable rewards. That's the ongoing motivation. I just think what's so frustrating here with this story is just what we don't know. We've got all of these different loot games, which are some of my favorite genres, MMOs, ARPGs, looter shooters, and we simply don't know how many games, which games, what combination of these are utilizing these dynamic variable rewards based on player activity. Like the examples that we've outlined here, some combination of them could be used in a few games, could be used in a lot of games, or could be used in most of the games in the genre. That's what's frustrating. We just don't know, and we really can't know. I guess on the plus side, you might get rewarded when you're first starting out, when you have bad gear, if you don't have a lot of friends on your friends list, or when you return from taking a break. And like I said, in those circumstances, when implemented in that way, these dynamic variable rewards are fine. They're nice even. They're welcome. But the negative side is that possibility that if you play a lot, you're punished with worse odds and will be getting worse loot. Or if you fancy yourself spending money on loot boxes and gacha items, the idea that every time you pull big, the next X amount of dollars you spend are almost going to be thrown out the window because they are reducing your chance of getting anything good
that's fucked
from that point forward, which is a major yikes. This whole thing really makes me think that there should be way more transparency. We should demand way more transparency as to how drop rates are calculated in a lot of these games and how or when those drop rates can change. This matters a whole lot less when it comes to just like what loot am I getting as a player and how often am I getting loot. It is frustrating in that it kind of, it certainly impacts like the motivation to keep grinding. If you know for sure that a game is using a system like this, punishing you for the more often you play, I imagine that's going to kill the desire.
If I knew that every time I pulled the Lich King, there was less of a chance of me getting invincible, I would not be doing it anymore. Okay, maybe I would. Maybe I'd do it a little bit more. But if I ever knew that there were these variables that were affecting the way how my chances of getting invincible, like friends list, like playtime, like other things, maybe I'd try to manipulate them in my favor. But I would definitely think it was fucked up, and it would really demotivate me from playing the game as a whole, because I would think, well, this shit probably exists everywhere if it exists here. This is just a scuffed game that's just trying to rip my time out.
A lot of people keep on playing, but that's just the thing. Unless something happens that forces
they aren't required,
developers to
they have
share
no reason to disclose it. Exactly. Going back to the very beginning of the video where they disclose the drop rate of things or the chance of getting something via a loot box, that's required now. I'm pretty sure that's a law. He didn't say it was, but I'm pretty sure it is. And that's why they're disclosing it, because they're not going to if they don't have to. You're 100% right. They don't give a shit about the players. They want your money. You are a milkable whale. Hopefully, that's what they want. And they're not going to disclose anything they don't have to by law. So yeah, this has to be changed through the law.
We don't know. We probably won't know unless there's some big investigation by someone like the Korean Federal Trade Commission when what they did with Nexon.
We only got one boss to kill, so we don't need that much time.
We won't know what games are using these systems and how many of them they're using. But yeah, it doesn't matter as much for loot rewarded from playing the game, but I certainly feel it's a pretty big deal when it pertains to items purchased from the cash shop. This idea that your rates will change depending on if you score big or something when you're buying loot boxes. I don't know about the legality, but yeah, sounds pretty garbage. I think at the very least, this should give you some pause when you consider playing any game developed by Nexon, MapleStory, Vindictus, or the upcoming game The First Descendant. Besides their history with the changing the rates of the cubes and making certain outcomes literally impossible, we know they have done this. It has been proven, and they were fine for doing so. There's a chance that that could also be happening in their other games, but that stuff aside, this whole dynamic rate manipulation, we know Nexon has the patent for it in Korea, and now we know if we weren't sure already in the past that it is something that could very well be applied to other games that we play, other loot games. And if that is happening, I mean, I sure would love to know. Or maybe I wouldn't, because maybe that would just mean I wouldn't want to play games that are implementing systems along these lines. Right. And again, look, randomness, it is part of the genre.
Yeah,
it's
not a bad
I just
thing,
feel like there has to be an established baseline of understanding of where that randomness comes into play, how and when it changes. We get better loot drops when we push higher levels, when we push harder content, when we go into different types of content, when we farm in different zones, when we farm different dungeons.
Right.
That is all an established understanding, and I think most of the player base goes into playing these games knowing that these things exist.
You've signed that contract. You're okay with it. You're playing the game and you're okay with that. What's not okay is when you signed up for things you don't realize you're signing up for. Like variable chance based on your friends list. What the hell?
It's really more so the punishing side of it. The punishing for frequency of playing. The punishing for the how good your gear is. The punishing for the number of people on your friends list. If there are a lot of loot games using systems like that, don't love it. Absolutely do not love it. That's going to do it for today's video, though. Thank you, as always, for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.
Damn. A great video. A great video. Yeah, very interesting. Like I said, we're okay with we sign up for something when we play a game. We sign up for the system that the game has implemented. What's not okay is a background system that's manipulating you because you don't even realize it exists, and it's changing things based on variables that are out of your control, or in your control, but you have no idea they're affecting things. Yeah, Sam loves punishment. Now let's raid for rock. Yeah, speaking of variable drop rate. Here's the thing, too. Under a patent, by the way, it looks like they file a lot in Japan and Korea. So, again, they would be defended in both, which are big video game countries. So they basically be defended against anybody who imports a video game into those countries.